This is Kid,
And this is Drag.
and today we're going to talk about,
All the stuff you think about.
oh yeah,
And today we're going to talk a little bit about the technology behind podcasting. I think it's apropos, and I've been asked a few questions about this because while I'm pretty new at podcasting and the whole Kid and Drag channel and chat that we're building up our following for, as we're just really about a month and a half into this. And thank you guys so much for those of you downloading. I really wanted to talk about the technology side of this, which is part of the channel as well. We talk a lot about gaming, but we definitely want to go back and talk about some of the technologies that go into anything that's fun, right? I'm not going to talk coding, not going to get into that stuff. I'm going to talk more like the tools that allow you to game well, stream if you're a video game streamer to Twitch or YouTube Live, or if you are generally just putting content or a content creator. Maybe that's the best way to frame that up, is this is more like content creator, havers of fun, might want to tune in and listen to this. So when getting into the podcast community, I see some great talent. I've got involved in a few groups on Facebook out there, got involved in a few groups on Instagram, just talking like, hey, what's your ideas? What are you doing? And bouncing around out there. And I see like 90% of the questions asked on these aren't like, how do you make great content? They're more specific around, how do you put together the great content? If I have a phone and a dream and a microphone, how do I make that work? So I want to start just a quick series, if you will, on some of the tools that I've accumulated for other reasons and flow directly into podcasting very simply. So I do a little bit of EDM, electronic music creation, play a little bit of guitar, and I wanted a way to make a sound studio. But then I'm also a big time gamer. Like, I like to play games. I'm not as good as a social media presence. So I do stream to Twitch, and I want to be able to do that when I want to, but I'm not like religious. I've got a big full-time job that takes up a lot of hours. So that is really a dedicated man sport, if you will, or woman. However, it's a dedicated sport that you're going to put a lot of time into to really get a following or anything like that. You need very consistent times and all that kind of stuff. And that's something we'll discuss later as we talk about the mechanics behind promoting yourself and growing an audience. As while I'm not a super pro, I am a very, very good student at how do we do things. It doesn't matter if it's the technology side. It doesn't matter if it's the marketing side in marketing yourself or marketing your brand or product. I study it a lot. But today I'm really going to focus more on the technology side about how do you get up and get going with podcasting? How do things work? Because when you start recording, you hear people that sound excellent, right? They've got all this amazing audio equipment, or they have the know-how, or they're paying somebody to process their tracks for them, and they sound really, really good. Very, very crisp sound. It's sharp. You're like, wow, that sounds just like a radio DJ. Well, there's a lot of tools out there to make that happen. But keep in mind that when we're talking about the audio and the things that go into that, there's a lot of work behind that. If you go back just 5 years, you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars to get into pro grade audio. And I will say more of a prosumer audio grade production, right? You look at recording studios and it's just got hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in equipment around to get certain sounds, right? Well, podcasting is not that extreme, because you might not be having just a ton of tracks that are just blowing your mind out there, where in a studio environment, the number of tracks, if you go back to 8-track recording and all that stuff, the number of tracks that you go as you interlace different effects and different people and things like that into a recording, like even on my EDM type productions, which are fairly simplistic when you look at the grand scheme of things, those things are having anywhere between 20 and 25, 30 tracks that blend together to get the mixture right as it fades from one to the other. So there's a whole lot of science behind sound. I would say it's probably the most complicated function out there because of that. And then when you really get into stacking on tons and tons of tracks on top of each other, you start really getting into CPU usage. And the wonderful thing today is there are budget-friendly PCs out there that are right on par. They're made to handle all these multitasking threads and all this stuff, all the really technical mumbo jumbo, it's perfect. Audio slides right into that very, very easily as they're gearing these computers up to handle massive amounts of data. And we get into more and more of the world of artificial intelligence, and we have all these machine learning programs that are going on out there. It needs more and more power. Well, the side benefit is your average PC does a great job at setting up for a recording studio. So my journey started off with, hey, I want to get a gaming computer, get something put together that'll also duplicate duties as doing some graphic stuff, just whatever I want to do. I want to be able to sit down and do that. So I built this one computer, and I started going, well, now I'm streaming with it. Now I'm gaming with it. I built it in such a way that it had enough threads in the processor so it handles all that on its own. And then I started streaming. And while I'm not very dedicated when I do it, I want it to be good. If I stream for 5 minutes a month, I want it to be excellent when it comes on. I want people to realize there's quality there. I don't want to put on a subpar performance. So I started digging into it, started playing around with it. And I tell you, the number one thing that hit me right away was microphone. I go and start off with a Blue Yeti, or it's a Blue Snowball mic, $50 or whatever at the time, and started recording a USB mic. And I was like, oh, okay, this is definitely better than my gaming headset, but it doesn't pick up my voice so well. And I started monkeying around with all the settings and all the functions that I could while recording and streaming with that. So here I am with this microphone. I'm thinking, oh, this is a lot better than what it sounded. Then I started streaming. I listened to it on a playback. I had other computers or phones sitting there monitoring, and I go, man, I don't sound as good as these other guys. Let me look into this a little bit more. And that turned into, oh, well, they're using the higher grade mic. Makes total sense. I get that. I just from a musical background and being in bands and playing guitar and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, oh, okay, yep. So a little bit better equipment. And at the next point, I went ahead and invested in like a Blue Yeti, which is the more commonplace entry level decent mic that you have. That's a USB that plugs into your computer. Well, I get that and started working with it, and I go, oh, okay, this is a little bit better. It had some manipulation on the settings, like I could change the different patterns that it received voice. It's kind of made as a all-in-one solution that has one that you can turn, and it faces two directions at the same time, so it's good for two people talking into one mic. And I go, oh, okay, well, that's a little bit better. And I started looking at the frequency responses, which is like where it optimally works at. It's really good overall product, and I got to give props to Blue Yeti, or the Blue product anyway, because most of their products are really, really solid. However, when I get to using it and I'm hearing myself, I go, that's not really the timbre, that's not how I want to project my voice. It doesn't, it's highlighting some things that I don't want highlighted in my voice, and it's taking away some things that are good about my vocals. And I go, this is a little agitating. I know most people wouldn't notice it, and I got the feedback from people listening. It sounds okay. And then I'd get feedback like, oh, it's too quiet. And I started realizing, well, let's dig into this a little bit more and start really doing some research. Obviously, when I get into it, I go, okay, we've got to move to XLR mics. Wow, that's a different investment, because now I'm tying that to a computer. We're automatically jumping from hobbyist to now I have to have something to connect an XLR, or the funky little three-pronged round plugs that you see on stage and in the concert arenas or anything, right? So here I am going, okay, well, I know that world. I've had bands. I understand. I get the point of it. You've got, the Shure SM58s are all-time favorite for bands, bar bands, stadium bands. Even the biggest of the big artists use those religiously because they're bulletproof, they're strong, all this stuff. And then I started getting around looking at podcasting. Like, what are people using out there? Then looking at radio DJs. And the rabbit hole opens up, right? So you've got ranges of microphones between, $100 around that neighborhood for like a SM58, which is a traditional, really made for stage presence, because it's very unidirectional, but not a bad thing for a podcast, right? You don't want trash noise. And it's a dynamic mic, so it doesn't require additional power. You don't have to have the 48-volt phantom power to make it go. But pretty decent microphone. Fantastic. Take a look at that. I even had one at the time, and I'm like, oh, well, I just need a DAW. If you talk to most groups, that's the trigger word for today is DAW, or digital audio workstation. what I would call it is a mixer with a USB output. Some people call them outboard sound cards because this basically replaces all the sound card that comes in your PC, the ones that mount inside. And if you get to looking at that, you're going to look at Newegg and all these manufacturers putting stuff up on Newegg and Amazon. Like, here's a sound card, $250. You get this, this, and this Dolby 7.1. Those are fantastic, but the quality is nowhere near one of these outbound soundboards that are they're professional audio equipment that you use as a consumer or anybody that just happens to have a USB output that integrates with computer software. Okay, this is pretty cool. Now I'm going to start looking into this. I looked at different solutions, whether it be the Scarlett. I've got, personally right now, counting on my desk, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different devices that can work as a digital audio workstation, meaning they will take a microphone input and send it to my computer on a channel, either mono or stereo, whatever I want to do. Now, when you look at them, 2 of them look like traditional mixers. One is a Roland VT3, a voice transformer, so I can add audio effects to my voice if I want and make it do weird stuff like this. Hello, baby. And just click a button and I'm right back to my normal voice. So a lot of manipulation I can do. Most of the podcasting, I just bypass that unless I figure at some point I'll do something crazy and have some weird voices or effects that go into play. So you got all these tools that get the sound into your computer. Now, what do you do with it? You find really, before we jump to that, I want to look at qualifying what you really want to do. Because I think, I look at my kids' school have made me a huge fan of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People because their whole elementary school is geared around those things. And one that stands out to me when I'm looking at the process that I went through to build this audio workstation, if you will, is begin with the end in mind. So really, you want to start with penciling down ultimately in your wildest dreams, where do you want to go with this? Is this going to be an interview based? Are you going to have multiple people on this? Are you going to have a lot of involvement with others? Is this something you're going to do consistently? Are you going to do the editing? Are you going to pass it off to somebody else? Like, what is your goal? So now once you've identified your goal, you can start piecing together your equipment, and it doesn't have to be super expensive. As I said, when I started, it was one PC, a single monitor that I added another monitor to, that later on added another monitor to, and started running into sound challenges. And then I ended up like, well, I've upgraded enough parts of my PC. I only need this or that, and I have a whole other PC. And I go, oh, well, that makes sense. I'll go ahead and do that. Now, untraditionally, in the streaming world where you're streaming games and whatnot, a lot of people have a 2 PC setup and they'll run the broadcast software on one PC and their game on the other to offload bandwidth. Well, I went a little bit different route that I have now a studio PC with all this wonderful audio equipment that piles into that. And then it broadcasts the sound only over to my gaming PC, which also streams games, records, does all that at one time. Okay, a little bit different, but that's kind of my progression. So I started doing one thing and started adding parts and moving forward. So if I would have started with the intent, hey, I want to do all these things, I probably would have mapped it out slightly differently, but not a lot. Essentially what I have is a audio chain that runs from my microphone, which is a Shure SM7B. That's one of the favorites among podcasters. It's a mid-range microphone, but does a great job at capturing a wide range of sound. And it runs into a Roland VT3. It runs then into a EQ, a compressor, gate, so it cuts out some of the background trash noise when I stop speaking. And that dumps into a mixer. I then dump other audio sources into that mixer, combine them, make them sound good mechanically, and then I send that into what is traditionally called the DAW. So I use a Scarlett 6i6, and I just basically dump all that stuff into 2 channels of that Scarlett, which then is interpreted into my recording software on my studio PC. Now, when I'm doing a live deal, I take the output of that and send it right to the second PC, and that's what's streamed. So you really get a conditioned, professional sounding vocal that's done in a live manner. However, when I'm doing these podcasts, I just click record on the recording software, and I've got a mixed vocal that I can levelize, and then I can mix in the introduction music. If I wanted to add background music into it while I play, that can certainly happen. So this is kind of the approach I took as a podcaster, and say that's what you really want to go do. First off, really identify what you want to do in the long term. Don't worry about buying stuff piecemeal, getting something super, super cheap. I know you'll hear that 100 times, is go in and buy the best and all that stuff. But I think that really qualifies, like, what do you want to do with it? So you really got to identify that, really identify, when you can, or how you build to that point, or when you're ready to invest, what that dollar amount looks like to you, and how professional do you want to sound? Then the second thing is, do you want to edit this yourself? Are you willing to learn and spend the time learning how to really master that sound, or build enough equipment together that you get such a professional sounding vocal when you speak, it needs less editing, less background noise? Are you willing to go the extra step of, conditioning a room for sound conditioning? And I don't mean sound deadening. I mean conditioning the sound, where you're putting bass traps in, you're putting items on your walls and around, so it bounces the sound in a good, healthy way. If you have it just completely soundproof, it really sounds dead on the air. You don't have that natural reverb in your voice. It doesn't come through. So there's a lot of components into this. The real thing is, as you're starting to podcast, if I were to start from scratch and I didn't have a penny already invested in all this stuff, that's what I would want to do, is stop and say, is this going to be a major part of my life? Am I going to invest X amount of dollars? Am I willing to do that right off the cuff? What does that look like? Once you do that, start looking at your path to get there. So listen to your voice. First off, go find a mic that loves your voice. There is a major difference. If you go to any recording studio that's a bigger recording studio, and you're going to record a song, they're going to put a bunch of mics in front of your face, let you hear a lot of different things. I would suggest going down to a Guitar Center or your local music store where they have a live demo. Turn the vocals, or don't put any vocal conditioning, leave it perfectly flat, and talk into a lot of mics and find what you love. Then start finding out, am I going to process these myself? Then look at your investment on getting a DAW. Is it going to be one that you can just dump raw vocals into, and you get some volume controls and some gain controls? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do a lot of stuff post-processing. So after you've recorded, you can go back in a software, whether you use Ableton. I personally use Reaper just because it's super powerful and very cheap, but you can go into any of these Ableton Live or any DAW software and work with it to condition your voice, whether it be, there's a ton out there, but I think the most easy to get your hands on are like Ableton, how much Reaper you're going to put into this. If you've identified a software that you can use in post-processing, or you've identified that, hey, you're going to invest more money, you want the DAW, but you're going to get more of a vocal chain, which I have, and that's where I'm talking about the mixer, the outboard EQ, and the second mixer, and the compressor and the gate. It gives me a really, really clean voice without a lot of post-processing. I level it out before I start. So all that is mechanical, and it's easier just to sit down and start recording. You don't have a lot of post-processing where you're having to work with effects and move out background noise, because I've conditioned my room to be somewhat like a recording studio, or definitely a prosumer recording studio. I've got my mixer set up, so when I sit down and just start talking, it's really as much as using a volume switch that I push up and down to get what I want. I hit record and I start playing, but there's a lot of pathing and planning before to make that happen. In the past, when I started off as a very, very new broadcaster, audio person, whatever, I had very simple equipment, as simple as a USB mic, and that caused a lot of trash noise. It wasn't capturing the voices I wanted it to. It did all these things, and it took a lot of post-processing. And I'm like, well, if I had a mixer, I could adjust this. If I had the compressor, it's going to pick up my voice a little bit better. If I have the gate, it won't pick up my air conditioner when it's blowing and I stop speaking for a second that I don't hear because I got headsets on. So all these things kind of went to that point, and you really have to stop for a minute and think, what am I going to do? Now, can you do it simply? Well, sure, absolutely. I got a wonderful little mic that plugs right into my iPhone. It's outboard, so it looks almost like a studio mic that you would imagine in the 1960s radio. And if I want to super clean, super easy, and make it sound really professional, I can use a simple recording software right on my iPhone, go sit in my closet, which has all the clothes in there, so it's got a really good sound to it, and record. It might not be as comfortable. It might not be as professional looking. It might not give me as much choice to edit, but it gives me a really clean sound. I've already got an iPhone. I drop $150 on a really nice outboard mic, and I'm recording really, really good quality stuff. So on the front end, you can start that way. A lot of it is what I like to call workflow problems. When I sit down, what motivates me to sit down and record this podcast or any other is my workflow is comfortable. I can sit down and quickly get to work and focus on podcasting. A simple workflow with a microphone plugged in your phone. You're going to go sit in your car, which has really good sound conditioning in a car. You're going to go sit in your closet, which has good sound conditioning without a lot of extra effort. Those are simple workflow things. Think about that, because the worst thing I think you can do as a podcaster, a recorder, a streamer, or anything like that is have where you sit down to do your job or to do your task, which is recording and streaming and doing that. You're not focused on that. You're focused on screwing around with how to do it, how to make it work. This doesn't work right. It doesn't sound right. And you start tweaking and you find yourself 4 or 5 hours in, frustrated and all that stuff. Simple answer. Fix your workflow. Figure out what you want to do. Build your workflow to that. If you want to start off simple, that's fine. Start off simple. Build into that later. But make it where you can take the obstacles out of the way from the time you want to sit down and record, broadcast, stream, whatever that is, to the time you actually start producing the content. Take that workflow time out, whatever it amounts. For me, it was a pretty extensive signal chain, or where from my mic to the recording, to make it get to that point for me. That was for my voice. That is to make me happy with how I sound. If you're happy with any of the before, like just the mic plugged into the iPhone, go for it. If you've got that voice that gets picked up very, very well with that, go for it. Don't hesitate to start recording. Just remember, as a content creator, your skill lies in creating the content. Build your package or your recording or your broadcasting setup to accommodate that. Then you'll enjoy it more. It'll come out in your cast, in your streams. They will see that you're there to be you and really express yourself. They won't get the frustration that you have futzing around with technology that is not comfortable to you or whatever. But get yourself recording. That way, you'll be happier. You'll enjoy it more. You won't run into a brick wall. You won't bounce your head up against things. Get yourself recording. Look at what you're willing to invest. Talk to a couple people. YouTube around. I spent hours and hours. Hit me up. I'll be glad to walk through. In fact, I'm going to meet up with somebody virtually and kind of walk them through how to set up what they are doing. I don't mind. I don't think most people mind, because it's interesting. Those people who understand it, it's interesting to us to teach it to other people. Don't hesitate to ask. Ask questions on YouTube videos that look kind of like what you want to do. Figure out what that is. Build a plan ahead of time to say, you know what? I want to get recording as fast as I can. How do I do that? Go get a really nice mic, plug it in your iPhone, buy a good recording app on there. There's a bunch, but it won't cost much. Your total investment is going to be $150, $250 in, and you've got professionally produced stuff. May not be as good as Joe Rogan, may not be as good as the best you've heard, but it'll get by. It'll get your content going in a great manner that people can listen to, and they can start enjoying what you do best, and that is creating content. All right, guys, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I'll continue this series a little bit more and get into some more details as I flesh it out and we get different options or different questions are asked out there. I'll be glad to answer those through this, but I do hope you enjoyed it. It's a big, long process for me. I'd be glad to share the knowledge. Anybody out there that's looking to do any kind of content creation for audio or video or streaming, feel free, message me. I'll be glad to answer the questions that you guys have. Thank you so much, and I am out. And that's our episode today, folks. Signing out for now. This is Drag.
And this is Ken. We'll catch you next time.